We are very fortunate tonight to have a couple of outstanding speakers. The first person is Dr. Catalina Lara, and Dr. Lara is the Senior Manager for Education and Learning for minor leagues with the Los Angeles Dodgers organization. It's a kind of a fascinating job. I'm going to turn it over to her and ask her to kind of share what it is that she does, and then hopefully we'll have time for some questions and answers. So without any further ado, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Lara.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thanks for the invite. I was joking earlier that when I said yes, I didn't think my calendar was going to be so clear at this point of the baseball season, but it is baseball. It's October, and you never know what will transpire. So here we are, Phillies, Arizona, and the Dodgers. We're all sitting home watching the game, right? So as Jeff mentioned, my official title is Senior Manager, Education and Learning for the minor league system. When I was hired as Education Coordinator 5 seasons ago. So I just completed my 5th season with the team. And I fall under baseball operations, in particular player development. My office technically is it's in Glendale, Arizona. But I live in Los Angeles, and because I travel so much, I am here in LA quite a bit. So I'll go into a little bit about like what my responsibilities are, what they have become, to give you an idea of what this looks like with the Dodgers. So the position I have is different in each team. At some point, Major League Baseball required the teams to provide some sort of education for minor league players, in particular, our international players. Okay, so that can be as basic as offering English classes to just whatever the team really wants to focus on, right? The Dodgers are we're probably one of the top 3 when it comes to education and learning, the resources that are provided to me to do the work that I do. Okay, so as you all know, the farm systems are composed of the academies in the Dominican Republic, and then the rookie league here in the United States, and then our affiliates. So I oversee anything that has to do with education of our players, and also professional development for our coaches, in particular when it comes to pedagogy. Coaching is teaching. And so the concepts, theories, practices that one uses in education definitely are transferable over to baseball. So in the Dominican Republic, we have the academy. And in that space, there used to be just kind of some English classes that were given. And then afterwards, there was a high school program that was started. When I was brought in, I was the first person to be a full-time Dodger employee to put a systematic program together, right? And so I oversee the Dominican Republic. I have staff there. We outsource some of this, and we have in-house for other stuff. And we run a very vibrant program there with English, definitely finishing the high school virtual, but we hire tutors for the players in person and virtually. We run 2 different high school programs because Venezuela does not play nice with the Dominican when it comes to documentation. So we had to adapt. So we run our high school programs, both of them. If the players don't finish while they're in the Dominican and they transition to the United States, we still continue supporting them throughout their high school program. In fact, if they're traded to a team that does not have the tutoring that we offer, we will still continue to work with those players if we're allowed to by the team that they're traded that they're traded to. So we have there's a deep commitment to that, because in a lot of the Latin American countries, finishing your high school diploma is equivalent to us in the United States finishing our bachelor's degree. And for many of these families, the player is the first one to graduate from high school, and it's a big deal for them. So the Dodgers don't make it mandatory. Other teams in the past have. The Dodgers are very much like, we're no rules, but there's a structure. And as an educator, it's if you provide quality education opportunities, if you build it, they will come. Sorry, I'm corny there, but it just fit. And so we run that. Beyond that, we also have expanded, and this has been during my time there, basic financial, like using the bank, something you would teach your own high school student, right? Your life skills when it comes to like finance. We can't tell them how to manage their money. We just kind of give them overviews about that. We go into just some things that have to do with healthy lifestyles. We introduce them to nutrition, basic nutrition, sex ed. There's a lot of misconceptions, and so we do that as well. We bring doctors in to help with that. What do drugs do to your body? Healthy relationships. We talk about like the cycle of violence and all of that in the Dominican Republic, and that has been pretty recent that we started that. I came in 5 seasons ago, and in my first season there, it became very clear to me that we needed to incorporate some of these things that we learn in the United States while we're in school. They're part of basic curriculum, and they don't. And then when they transition to the United States, we're waving our fingers at them saying, you can't do this, sexual harassment, or the drugs, or the drinking, or whatever, without first educating on what these concepts mean and the terms mean in a Latin American country by people who are experts in those countries. I'm quite adamant about, like, I don't have to be the face, and we need people who understand the cultures in order to deliver these, touchy subjects. Beyond that, we do, teach them like how to put a spreadsheet together, basic computer literacy. So, that's what happens in the DR. In the DR, I also work a lot with our staff. We have a lot of young coaches that transition from being players into coaching, whether they come from us or from another team. And so, the onboarding process of, how do you deliver your content, whether it's, pitching or hitting or understanding a heat map or numbers, whatever it is, our coaches are the ones who are in the front line there delivering that information. So I sit with them when they get hired, and we go over some basic pedagogy that applies in baseball. Once they get to the United States, there's life skills, transition programs. We do cultural acclimation camps, and we offer an extensive English program that is very individualized. That's what we do really well. Other teams have different models. We have our model, and our model just mimics how we see player development, where you come, you're drafted into the organization, and we're going to meet you where you're at. And that's really true, so near to my heart as an educator, especially, some of my background is students with learning disabilities, first gen students. And really, it's like you meet the student where they're at. And in this organization, that is really part of the culture. And so with the English programming, it's what is it that you would like to work on, and we will meet your need. For all of this, we need resources. I have, staff in the United States, like I said, staff in the Dominican Republic. We hire experts. So the Dodgers invest a substantial amount, and I've never been told no to whatever I've asked for. And that is really the reason I've stayed, because I thought I was going to come for 2 years, like a consulting thing, and then I was going to leave. put something together. But really, it's a dynamic environment where I'm allowed to be in spaces I never thought I would be in. When I have, pitching coordinators, and here in LA, I have the analytics team, reach out. I'm now a resource at a different level than I ever thought I was going to be. And I still don't know a lot about mechanics and the analytics, but that's good because I have, sometimes I'll say, you need to explain that to me in layman's terms, or you need to like bring that down a little bit, because if I don't get it, I don't know how, you're going to have a 20-year-old kid who, went to a junior college understand, or much less a kid from Curaçao. So, that's the majority of what I do. I think I tried it, try to kind of cover it all. I do travel a lot, so I'm gone from home probably 2.5 weeks to 3 from LA. And that's one of the it's wonderful, and it's also a challenge. So I do have a couple of images here, and then I will probably go into some Q&A with you guys. I think that's going to be the best way to do that. Okay, so just so those who may not know, and I know I'm talking to a group that understands baseball, these are all the places that we have a footprint. And this picture is actually in Campo Las Palmas. I'm in Campo Las Palmas 4 to 5 times a year. And via Zoom. I love the Zoom thing. And it's a beautiful location. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, and the food is great, and people are great. I love it, except that I have to travel through Miami, but other than that. And so this is just, I use this presentation for something else, but each location has a slew of staff. And so everybody on this list, and for every team, I know personally, and they will reach out to me just with whatever comes up. I'm bilingual, so which is a necessity in this job. And so sometimes I'm just like the liaison, or I'll translate as well. But there's just a lot of people. There's a little bit about my background. It's my family. I'm from Venice originally, but my parents are both from Mexico. I'm the first person on my mom's immediate family, my dad's immediate family, to be born in the United States. And that really has been very helpful in the job that I do with our international staff and players, because I saw what it was like for my family members to come and be here first. And I've had to translate since I can remember. So all of those things that growing up were kind of, English is a second language, first generation, things like that. In this job, we're an asset. And I never thought that would be the case. And, typical day, I'm traveling, I'm with players, I take them out to eat. Building relationships is huge. That's what the farm director told me the first 2 weeks I was there. And I asked him, I said, what do you want me to do here? Like, and he just said, that's why we brought you. We don't know what we don't know. But what you can do is build relationships, because especially I was only one of 3 women at the time. Because it's, you're forging this new ground and in a new position. So build relationships. So, I'm on the field all the time, in classrooms. These are some of my most memorable moments. This is John Suhu, who, if he's the photographer extraordinaire for the Dodgers. He's the one who captured the Kirk Gibson, hit that you see, when he's rounding the bases. I get to hang out with people like Charlie Huff and Rick Honeycutt and Bobby Cuellar, like they're friends. And I've learned so much from them. They're so wise. I get to see guys graduate. And this picture of the women, there were only 3 of us 5 seasons ago. And now these are the women in baseball operations. in different capacities. So it's been a great experience. And then finally, we had 2020 where we won the World Series, which was I'm a mom from the San Fernando Valley, and I won. I was able to be part of a World Series, even though it was 2020. And this picture down here is actually when Andrew Friedman and Brandon Gomes came to Camelback to give us in player development our rings. They flew there for like a couple of hours because we don't get the big showy thing that happens in LA. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I know I went really fast and I covered a lot, but
no, absolutely fascinating, really interesting. Thank you so much. I know I've got some questions, and I'm sure other folks do too. But let me just start by saying I think this is so cool that the Dodgers and other clubs are doing this as well. But I remember reading Clemente's biographies, and when Roberto Clemente got started, he literally had no one to speak Spanish to. He would try to find homes in the various cities that they went to. I've heard stories of lots of players who come to the United States and have no understanding of so many things, and they order, they eat pizza for 3 months because it's the only thing they know to order, or these kinds of stories. So let's say I'm a typical not typical, I'm a very talented baseball player in Dominican, and the Dodgers want to sign me. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me, Dr. Lara?
So first of all, international signees, you can sign as young as 16. Okay. Outside of the United States. So you're 16, 17 years old, you'll sign, and you first will go to Campo Las Palmas. So right now we have like a Brazilian Japanese kid, we have a Russian Cuban kid, we have a German kid, we've had a couple of players from Uganda. And if you're under 18, you will start in the Dominican Republic. Okay, let's say you don't speak Spanish, because that is becoming like the Ugandans didn't speak Spanish, the German kid didn't speak Spanish, the kid from Bahamas doesn't speak Spanish. And so we offer them Spanish classes so that they can, learn and communicate while they're there. So you sign and you come to Campo Las Palmas and you live it's like a boarding school, right? Baseball's first. You do baseball all day. They're learning what it means to be a baseball player. I have my, personal opinions of like how we are training young athletes. And I think there was an article, I don't know if it was today or whatnot, about like the single sport athlete, like super young in the United States. We kind of look down on that. But in other countries, especially third world countries, this is an opportunity for a family to get out of poverty. And so you see these young men, they know how to, throw hard, or they can, they show promise in hitting. So they come to us, and we're now diversifying that. We're like, there's the performance science component, there's performance, like the athletic training, there's the nutrition, learning how to eat, all those habits that they don't necessarily have, even our European kids, right? So we're starting from scratch in some ways into what does it mean to build routine and take care of yourself, so that you can continue to grow.
Excellent. I could pummel her with questions. Anybody else have some before I start asking more? Yes, Greg.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how you found out about this job.
Well, my oldest daughter, who's just turned 26 on Sunday, she went to the University of Arizona specifically because she wanted to work in sports. Her goal was to work for the NFL. She loved football. And so she was about to graduate, and I wanted to be the helpful mom and say, hey, let me enjoy your senior year. Let me help you look for work. And she said, you don't know how to look for work in sports, Mom. That's not your area. She's like, yeah. Uh-huh. And I said, well, I can look on like, is it Indeed or where do you look? And she's like, no, there's a special website, Teamworks. And she said, but you can't get on there because you don't have your resume or anything. You don't, and she wouldn't give me her password. I'm like, well, I don't need, I'll still do it anyway. And then it became kind of a challenge. I was like, oh, don't tell me that I can't help you or that I don't know what I'm doing. And so I put my resume in, didn't change anything because I wasn't looking for work. I knew that I was going to be transitioning into a new field, but it was not the right time. And so I put my information in there, and right away this job came up. And when I looked at it, I had no idea that it was in Arizona base, that I was going to have to basically move there the first year or commute, which I did. And it was a 3-month conversation with our farm director and the assistant farm director. I actually told them I'd help them find somebody. Because it just, I couldn't imagine all of a sudden working in Arizona and then commuting back to LA for 3 days. And the pay in baseball, unless you're like C-suite and stuff, it doesn't pay what one thinks. And so I wasn't going to leave for a huge pay cut either. So that's how, and they convinced me to try it. That's why I thought I was going to do it for a year, maybe 2, and then I was going to exit. So that's how that happened.
Let's see, Andrew. Yes.
Dr. Lara, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm a big booster of colorful women. My wife is a semi-professional drag racer. I have a 10-year-old granddaughter who I'm trying to get her into math because I think girls get ghettoized and they're not liking math. We have the situation with Kim Ng of the Marlins, who just quit because you know how that works. And the Giants actually just interviewed Elisa Nacken to be their manager. So I'm old enough to remember we used to have a saying, "You throw like a girl." Well, now we wish we could throw like these girls. I congratulate you.
Thank you. And I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that because of the picture with all these ladies, the majority of them are either athletic trainers or analytics and performance science. And performance science is like, they have masters and PhDs in physics and things of that nature. And one of the young women there though came to us from the Angels originally, and she's very young, but her goal is to be a farm director and eventually a general manager one day. And it has been they're all younger than I am, and that has been just a part of this that I didn't anticipate, like mentoring and learning from them at the same time. Because sometimes when I'm ready to say, let's just wait, let's step back, my daughter, the older one, and then they're like, we've been waiting a long time. We don't feel like we need to wait anymore.
Very good. Very good. Other questions? Yes, Richard. You need to unmute. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work, Dr. Lara. I appreciate it. I just wanted to know, is there any other markets that the Dodgers are in, or any other teams like in Asia or anything like that?
Well, we have scouts throughout the world. We're everywhere. And like I mentioned earlier, 2 years ago, now we signed the first players from Uganda to our organization. And they came to the Dominican Republic, and we brought them over with a coach, because we have a collaboration with the school there, and we help in PE for girls and boys, so it's not just boys. And these particular young men showed some promise. One is catcher, one is a pitcher, and so this year, one of them actually, both became the first to actually play it at a high level. They got to the affiliates. One of them was pushed up because of the injuries we had. He ended up in OKC in AAA, and he got to hit. So that's like national news. But we do have scouts all over the world. There's no stone unturned. You know, from the player side, like we want to explore that. And then obviously it's a business, and the more markets that we get into, the better for us.
Very good. I think we've got time for one more question or two. Let's see. Anybody else? Barry?
Is it any different when dealing with Asian players?
Oh, that's one of the things that has, when I came in, we had to sit down and really talk about like how we deliver how we engage with the players from different countries. One very simple thing is, you know, if I sit down with one of our Taiwanese players and I'm giving information, and then I stop, and then I wait for them to respond. Your feedback. That's been something that we've had to talk, just everybody say, well, you know, it's in Asian cultures, it's disrespectful to like talk right away. That means you weren't listening. So what does that look like when you're speaking to somebody from an Asian country? And also just in Latin America and Asia, there's a respect for the person who is a supervisor or older than you. And so when you're saying, hey, do you have any questions? That doesn't mean you're questioning me and my knowledge. So we've been having to train the players to be able to be comfortable to push and offer, feedback, which is very American. But it's part of the Dodger culture. We want to know what the players think. We want to know how they're processing this. And also on the coaching staff, because we have coaching staff from all over the world, to some basic understanding of the differences.
Excellent. Now we have one question here from Allan Reifman, and he's written it out to everybody. Allan, do you want to ask, or do you want me to read that?
Why don't you go ahead?
It says, for players who are a little older than the newcomers you've described and who have a high school diploma or equivalent, do the Dodgers or other teams help them take online college courses? Minor leaguers on long bus rides seem to have a lot of time on their hands.
Okay, so if you were signed in the United States, most contracts come with an education stipend, right? So that's there. For international players, there's a nonprofit organization, BAT, and they also provide funding, especially if it's in their country, because in the United States, as you know, it's expensive. We gauge. So we just signed 7 high school players this year, and they have the stipend. And so there were 2 that asked, should we start college right away? We had a couple that have some classes under their belt. So what we told them is first, figure out, let's see what the year looks like. So, the ebbs and flows. We do help. We will provide, the Dodgers will provide tutoring if they need it. It's just a matter of them figuring out when and how much time they actually have, because yes, they do have, time on the bus rides, but, in Arizona, it was 119 for days. Nighttime was 98 degrees, 102 degrees, and they started practicing at 12 in the afternoon, and they were finishing up their games at 10, 11 at night. And in theory, they have this time, but it is, it's a difficult lifestyle. And so I'm there to kind of guide them to, if they want to take classes, when the best time for them to take the classes, so the money doesn't run out, because there's a clock that Major League Baseball has, not us, but it's Major League Baseball has. If they start, they need to finish a degree within X amount of years. So sorry, it's not a straight answer.
No, that's great. And I think this has been an absolutely fascinating presentation, Dr. Lara. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. For everybody else, Kathy and I both received our doctorates from USC, so we right, so we have that in common, and we also have someone else in common, which is my wife is Kathy's cousin. So I actually found out about her job at a family get together, and I thought I asked Barry, I said, can we have her come and speak sometime? He said, yeah, of course. So it's been really interesting, and I thank you so much. I have more questions, but again, I'll hit you up the next time we're sharing a meal. And thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. All
Thank
right.
you guys all for being such a captive audience, and I'm really excited to hear Erik.
Right. So exactly, and so it's kind of a Latin themed night here with our SABR group, because I know that Dr. Lara and myself both have a great, I'm sure many others here, a great deal of love and affection for Fernando Valenzuela. And so it's pretty cool that we're able to get Erik Sherman here tonight, and he responded right away, and I thank you for that. If you don't know, he's written several books, and what we're going to talk about tonight is Daybreak at Chavez Ravine, Fernandomania, and the remaking of the Los Angeles Dodgers. We're so grateful that you're here and excited about it. So, Erik, I'll turn it over to you. Erik Sherman.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Catalina. That was a great presentation. I'm going to give you maybe about a 15-minute talk about the book, and then I'll take Q&A. And I know that you're anxious to watch the second half of that baseball game. So the true impactful story of Fernando Valenzuela, it didn't begin in 1981 when he burst onto the scene with Fernandomania. It didn't begin even when he was born in 1960. The true impact of Fernando actually began 7 or 8 years before he was even born. When the city of Los Angeles declared eminent domain on Chavez Ravine, and they were going to build affordable housing. So what they did was they took the 3 neighborhoods in Chavez Ravine, and they cut deals with the almost 100% Mexican Americans, 50, 60 cents on the dollar, got them to sell their property, sometimes 2 and 3 generations of Mexican Americans. They were going to build the affordable housing. Well, what happened was the affordable housing was struck down by the Red Scare that hit LA particularly hard around 1952, 53. And affordable housing was deemed as at best socialist and at worst a communist endeavor. So the plan was scrapped. So the Mexican Americans that did not sell thought they were in the clear, that they could stay in these happy neighborhoods where in a lot of cases they grew their own food in the backyard, and they had schools and churches, and they thought they could stay. Well, about 2,600 miles east, the Brooklyn Dodgers were looking for a new home. And the city of Los Angeles was stuck with 300 acres of property at Chavez Ravine. So the Dodgers were lured out to Los Angeles with the promise of a grandiose 56,000-seat stadium, state-of-the-art, all the parking that they could think of, and an extra 200 acres to do with what they wanted to do. It was a lot better than their situation back in New York, in Brooklyn, where they had a 27,000-seat stadium at Ebbets Field. They were immensely popular in Brooklyn. They were winners. They were winning pennants. They even won the World Series in 1955, but they couldn't expand Ebbets Field. So they needed a place to go. Robert Moses, the New York City architect or city planner, wouldn't help. So the Dodgers moved to LA. So they start building Dodger Stadium. And in the process, the remaining Mexican American residents Some of them were forcibly dragged from their homes and literally watched as their homes of 2 and 3 generations were bulldozed to the ground. So you can imagine how the visual and the very act that the city of Los Angeles did to clear way for Dodger Stadium did not sit well with Mexican Americans or Latinos. So when Dodger Stadium opened in 1962, really up until 1981, various sources that I interviewed told me that despite the heavy Latino population in Southern California, Dodger Stadium crowds were comprised of about 5% of Latinos. It was a very white crowd. But that all changed in 1981 with Fernandomania. Fernando, a 20-year-old pudgy kid with the eyes to the sky delivery, captured the imagination of not just Dodger fans, but the Mexican-American community and the Latino community at large. He starts off with the greatest beginning to a baseball career in history for a starting pitcher. 8 wins, no losses, ERA of 0.50, gets on the cover of Sports Illustrated, but those weren't even his most impressive achievements. 7 weeks in the big leagues, he gets invited to the White House by Ronald Reagan, a luncheon to meet with the Mexican president, Portillo, who was visiting. The first George Bush was there, Alexander Haig was there. And at this luncheon with 200 or so people, they weren't lining up for President Reagan's autograph. They were lining up for Fernando's autograph, even Reagan himself. So I wrote a chapter about it entitled Mr. Valenzuela Goes to Washington. And really, a strong case can be made that Fernando's visit to the White House served as far more than a friendly meet and greet. It was actually a harbinger for the Immigration and Control Act under the Reagan administration, and ultimately 2.7 million individuals were granted legal status under the law. So Chicanos call it the Fernando factor. So why did I write this book? Well, we were coming up on the 40th anniversary of Fernandomania, and I was utterly shocked that no one had written a book on Fernando's life or his impact, not just on baseball, but on Latinos. Now, I always give this example. When Fernando was going for his 8th straight win, he was in New York pitching against the Mets at Shea Stadium. The Mets in 1981 weren't just a terrible team, but they were terribly boring, and they were drawing about 5,000 fans a game. Well, when Fernando appeared on a Friday evening in late May, he drew an announced crowd of 43,000, but every witness that was there told me there was not a seat to be had. Back in those days, the National League only announced tickets, tickets sold. Do I have that right? It was tickets sold. Yeah, but in action, right. So even though the announced crowd was 43,000, there was really 56,000. What Fernando was doing throughout the country was he was bringing Mexican Americans from outside of the shadows and into the stadiums for the first time. He was bringing women out to baseball games for the first time. Mexican American women, Catholic women that would bring rosary beads to Dodger Stadium and around baseball. So he brought more new fans into baseball stadiums, arguably, than any other player in the history of the game. So I was shocked when no one had written a book about Fernando, and I suddenly found out why. Fernando is, even though he's been a Spanish language broadcaster for the Dodgers for about 20 years, he's immensely shy. In fact, for all of you that watched the Dodgers for all those years, you know that Jaime Jarrín was his interpreter during press conferences, well beyond the point that Fernando understood English, but he just isn't comfortable with drawing attention to himself. The night he pitched the no-hitter in 1990, watch it on YouTube, the last out, he was off the field in 27 seconds. Most players, they pitch a no-hitter, it's this big elaborate on-field celebration. Not with him. So I had a sense that Fernando was not going to cooperate. I interviewed nearly 100 people in his inner circle who were an immense help, and outside of his inner circle, people that were deeply impacted by Fernando, like Nomar Garcia Parra and so forth. And I remembered this wonderful long-form essay written by Gay Talese for Esquire back in 1966 entitled "Frank Sinatra Has a Cold." So Frank, for whatever reason, was bitter with Esquire and would not allow the legendary writer Gay Talese to interview him. So Gay Talese interviewed everybody that he could that knew Frank, that hung out with Frank, that was in his inner circle, outside of his inner circle, and wrote one of the great long-form essays in literary history. So that was my goal. So I interviewed everybody that I possibly could, and the feedback that I've received has been really positive. People that know him really, really well have said that this book really nails who Fernando is and what he's like, and certainly his impact on the game. So I did want to read you just the very first paragraph of the book, just to give you a sense of how I went about writing it. The legend sits alone in the crowded Dodger Stadium press cafeteria, wearing a navy blue blazer, light blue shirt, and dark sunglasses one late August afternoon. His face is round, and his jet black hair is cropped short. He is almost ghost-like in the sense that somehow it's easy to walk right by or sit near him without noticing the all-time Dodger great. An icon should light up every room they enter. Instead, this one tends to blend in. He sits alone, not because he's egotistical or self-centered, in fact, quite the opposite. In a city built on larger-than-life superstars, Fernando Valenzuela is an inhibited and reclusive one. And the Dodgers team historian likens him to a baseball Greta Garbo, big star, but who really kept to herself. So his legendary shyness, his teammates nicknamed him Senior Silent when he was as young as 19 years old, and perhaps it's because of an incident that happened when he was still 18 years old, and I wrote a short paragraph about that as well. It goes as follows. Valenzuela, too, has never forgotten an embarrassing incident that occurred at a spring training English class in 1980. Barely 19 and less than a year out of the Mexican leagues, Valenzuela was so shy he would only smile at the instructor when she called upon him. The day's lesson was a simple drill on phrases used in ordering breakfast. When the teacher insisted that Valenzuela reply, Dodgers minor league instructor Chico Fernandez leaned over and whispered an answer in the trusting youngster's ear. "Taco?" answered Valenzuela. The room, filled mostly with veterans, broke up laughing. Valenzuela left the class and never returned. So I think incidents like that, thank goodness we have people like Catalina right now to make sure something like that would never happen. But stuff like that happened all the time back in those days. So, like I said, a strong case can be made that Valenzuela created more Dodger fans, more baseball fans worldwide than any player in the history of the game, including, and perhaps this is also because it's more, these are more modern times that we're talking about, more so than Babe Ruth or Jackie Robinson. At the very least, I think when you talk about the most impactful players of all time, Valenzuela's got to be on that Mount Rushmore of baseball, along with Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, and my other choice is Marvin Miller, with the greatest impact. So I know time is short. I could go on and on about Fernando and the book, but at this time, I'd like to open it up to questions.
That's great.
Yeah, Andrew. Yeah.
I've had two very pleasant personal encounters with Fernando. My brother and my son and I, our pastime is sneaking in the ballparks. Well, in 1981, my son was 5.5 years old. They said, let's go down to Dodger Stadium and meet Fernando. So we got there like noon for a 7:30 game. Walked in like we owned the place, and actually made our way to the Dodger dugout. And it's hours before batting practice, and there's guys there working out. And Fernando appears. He comes out of the tunnel, and he's sitting there. And my 5.5-year-old son sat next to him. He put his arm around him. I got a picture taken. But then Tommy Lasorda shows up, and my son's 5.5, and he's running around. And he says, "Is that young man with you?" I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, just keep your eye on him for safety's sake." It never occurred to him to say, "Who are you and why are you here?"
Yeah.
So, and then years later, in around 2002, 2003, I was at a coffee shop in Los Feliz with a couple of friends, and there's Fernando on the phone, he's standing there, and I went up to say hi to him, and he was on the phone. I said, "Sorry." So 10 minutes later, he was doing the stuff. He came over to the table and said hello to everybody and shook our hands. And I thought, this is a classy guy. This is a civilized human being. But yeah, my son and I were at his no-hitter. I was at his game in the 81 World Series. So yeah, big fan. And I know you agree, Eric, that he should be in the Hall of Fame just because of the influence. Come on.
Well, I have a funny story. So advanced copies of the book were sent to the Dodgers. Years and years ago, in fact, my very first book, I've now written nine books, and my first book was with Glenn Burke, who was a Dodger. And it was a highly controversial book. And it didn't paint the Dodgers in the late 70s in the best of lights. And so I wasn't surprised when they wanted to look at advanced copies of this book, since I was the author. And it's interesting, in the last chapter of my book, the last chapter is entitled Legacy, I argued hard for the Dodgers to make an exception and retire Fernando's number. And 3 weeks after the advanced copies were sent, they made the announcement that they were retiring number 34. Now, I'm not going to take credit for it, but if it helped a little bit, Fernando owes me big time.
Other questions? Yes, Soraira. Did I say that right?
Hi, it's Soraira. Yes, close enough.
Close, not too bad.
Yeah. Hi, Eric.
Hi there.
I'm actually a professor of Mexican American Studies at Los Angeles City College, and I teach about Chavez Ravine and Fernando Valenzuela and his impact just throughout Mexican American history, not just his baseball legacy. But I do have one question. I read your book, which, side note, I'm also a tour guide for Dodger Stadium and was actually charged with writing the Fernandomania tour, which was a special tour that we ran for when we retired his number.
Wow.
And so I used your book as research, actually perfect timing, by the way. But I did have a question. Your book set out to look at the impact of Fernando on the Latino community specifically. Did you ever consider having a Latino co-author with you?
No, I didn't. I interviewed Mexican Americans for the book, but that's not an easy thing. No matter what the topic would be. when you're talking about an 80, 90,000, 100,000 word book, and you have 9 months to do it, 12 months to do it. I could only, really work alone on it. The only person I would have considered as my co-author, I'm sure you can guess.
Richard Santillan.
Fernando Valenzuela.
I'm thinking author-wise, Richard
Right.
Santillan, who's written dozens of books on Mexican American baseball history.
Yeah, no, I've written books with a co-author, but they were always the subject,
Mhm.
So in a sense, you could call me a ghostwriter, even though I was always given, the co-author title. But no, something like this, I interviewed nearly 100 people for the book. Many, many, many of them were Latinos, and I just couldn't imagine writing a book with somebody else, especially, it's even if I lived in Los Angeles, I just couldn't imagine like sitting down and actually creating a book with anybody else. It's it's just something I couldn't do. I think it's very hard for people to do that, and usually when you have a co-author, one of the authors is doing the writing, and the other might be helping with research, and because everyone has their own writing style too. That maybe in academia, that's more prevalent. My wife is in academia, and I know that she has authored, books with others. But for something like this, I think it would be very hard to do, at least for me.
Greg has a question, I think.
Well, not only a question, I have a comment. Back in the early 90s, my wife was in Rotary International, and we went to Mexico City on a convention. And one of the evenings we got to spend with a Mexican family. And when they find out I was a baseball fan, immediately they asked questions about Fernando. They wanted to know about Fernando. So even in Mexico City, he had a big following.
Yeah, I'm begging my publisher to do a Spanish language version of this book, so it could be sold throughout the United States and Mexico and Latin America. I think they are really missing the boat. A week doesn't go by when someone doesn't reach out to me through my website saying, when is the Spanish version coming out? And it hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to keep pushing for it.
Very good. Other questions? Yes, Perry.
Oh, I'm on. Hi, Erik.
Hi, nice to see you.
Likewise. And Soraya, thank you so much for asking him the question about whether Erik considered a co-author, a Spanish-speaking co-author, because a lot of history has been written from the, white dude-centric perspective. And so therefore, a lot of history that happened has not been told or taught. And I think it's an important question to raise about what Erik has brought to the story of Fernando Valenzuela. But you said you've read his book, and I've read a couple of them too, and I think he does a really excellent job of getting into that mindset without bringing the white centric perspective to it. And I wanted to thank you for that, because it's a little off-putting. The question with this new movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, is it's told from originally Martin Scorsese made the movie focusing on the FBI investigation rather than on the the Indian perspective, but then he decided to make the Native Americans the central characters in the story he told. And I think you do that beautifully with Fernando and your book, and I wanted to thank you for that. And
Oh,
also
thank you.
to congratulate you on your upcoming induction into the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. And looking forward to that very much, and very well deserved.
Thank you so much. And with this book, I was just notified a few days ago that it's been nominated for Baseball Book of the Year, the Casey
Yeah.
Award. So
Yes.
I'm real
Yeah.
happy about that. It's a humbling experience to be nominated, and you know, I just hope that I've given added exposure to everything, you know, the plight of the Mexican Americans in Chavez Ravine and around the country, and how Fernando, how his brilliance impacted that community. And, you know, just to let you know, I mean, I think one of my favorite interviews I did for the book was with Teresa Romero, who is just exhibit A. You know, she was born in Mexico. She came to the United States when she was about 20 years old, didn't speak a word of English. And now she is the head of the United Farmers Workers Union, a successor, a couple removed from Cesar Chavez. And I got to interview her and to hear her talk about how, you know, she came into the country around the same time that Fernando really came into prominence, and how that inspired her. Interviews like that, I think, were really helpful in expressing what I wanted to, with regards to Fernando's impact. You know, I did the best that I could, you know, to give a very balanced overall description of what was going on, even before Fernando was born, and what was going on, and I think that really helped set up the story of Fernando. You know, you had to go back and tell the story of that region.
Yeah, between you and Eric Nussbaum, I think you have done a wonderful job of telling the story from the right perspective of Chavez Ravine, and how, you know, people were driven out of their homes and what it must have been like. And it's very important to tell that story. So thank you for doing that.
Kathy, you have a question. Dr. Lara.
Yeah, so one of the other hats I wear at work is I chair the Somos LA, the employee resource group for our Latino employees. And you know, with the two books that you know, Perry just referenced, the Latino employees have, you know, looked towards those and read them. And, you know, we have a lot of young members and they don't know all the history, right? And we also have had Dr. Santillan come in and speak at Tatter Stadium, so Soraya, to just like the impact of baseball in general. I mean, not the impact, but the history of baseball, the Mexican American community, and baseball in Southern California in particular. But with, you know, with Fernando, the storytelling, I think, is really important, you know, because I've seen articles written on this, and we have these conversations about what does it mean to be specifically Mexican American, be a Dodger fan, and the impact that Fernando had. You know, that's why I'm a baseball fan to some degree, was because my my dad started watching baseball because of Fernando. And I remember
Right.
going to see him with my grandpa, who came from Mexico, right? And so I think what you brought to the table there was like it was storytelling, the storytelling component of it. That especially for our younger employees that are Latino, they could wrap their mind around the history of it. Because it's hard, I'm an academic, so I want to put articles, academic articles in front of them, and or journal entries or whatever. But it's not the same as that storytelling. I would have loved it if Fernando would have, co-authored with you. I
Me
think
too.
that would have been incredible. But yes, he is very, very shy. And I also think it's like our responsibility as Mexican Americans, like to jump in and tell our stories as well. So I think it more of thank you for doing for going there, and it's a challenge to us to if we want our voices heard, then we need to step up and try to figure out how to do that. And and this is the same thing with our Dominican, so many Dominican players, right? And so you don't see us doing that. So so it's like it's not a question, it's just kind of a comment to the impact today with the employees within the organization who are Latino, specifically Mexican American, and where we kind of are with it's weighty. There's a lot of weight with the story. There's a feel good, but then there's the part of this is the history.
Well, I mean, if you go to Dodger Stadium today, you'll have 50% Latinos, and that's not coming from me. That's coming from Jaime Herrin, who told me that, the legendary Spanish language broadcaster who's in the Hall of Fame and who was Fernando's interpreter. And he told me that there would be nights where he would hear much more Spanish in the ballpark than English. And what I observed from spending so much time in Dodger Stadium a couple of years ago when I was working on this book was there were just as many Fernando jerseys as there were Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman jerseys. And I mean, these were being worn by 18, 19, and 20-year-old kids who clearly weren't even born yet when Fernando played. But like it was their parents and grandparents that would tell them the story of Fernando, and it's lived on. So when you talk about impact, it's been a lasting impact.
We have one more question. Wonderful. Richard, and then we're going to wrap up.
Yes, I just got the book today, so thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
When Fernando came out, I was only 10 years old, and looking back, it was a humongous thing. It's just crazy to look back at it now to see how humongous it was. But I do have a small, quick story. I was at a Dodger game years ago, and he was up in the press box, and I believe it was like maybe the 7th inning stretch, and we're singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," and the announcer just said, "Oh, hey, there's Fernando," and he's, everybody's clapping, and I turned around, and I'm like, "Hey, hey," and I pointed up, there's Fernando, and I have witnesses that were around me. He points down and he points to me, and everybody around me was like, "Yeah, he pointed at you. Oh my God, you see that?" I'm like, "Yes." It was just like the best thing that happened at Dodger game. You know what I mean?
That's fantastic.
So, yeah. Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome. I hope you enjoyed the book.
It's hard to think of any human being more beloved in the Los Angeles area than Fernando Valenzuela, and that's a great story. I love it. Wonderful speakers tonight. Thank you so much. Barry, I'm going to ask you, do you have an announcement about, isn't there a celebration of life for Dick Beveridge coming up? You want to share that with the group?
Yeah, that was actually Sunday.
Oh, it was last Sunday. I'm sorry. I
It was.
apologize.
And we did have several SABR members there, as well as members of his family.
Very good. Very good. Any other announcements for the good of the order before we wrap up? If you don't know about Dick Beveridge, by the way, I would encourage you to find out. He is a pioneer, was a pioneer in our organization, and And I'm grateful to have met him. I'm also grateful tonight for our speakers, who I think really did a great job. And I know we're all kind of half interested in the goings on there in the other room, or wherever your closest TV is. But I think we're very blessed to have such excellent speakers tonight. So thank you again. Wish you all well, and we shall be in touch soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you again.